Welcome, everyone. I'm Erik Heimark. I work for Renewing the Countryside as a farm business management specialist, and I'm joined by several other staff here today. And we're going to be talking about value-based decision making. This is part of our risk management webinar series. So thanks for joining your lunch hour with us and learning a little bit more about how to manage the risks on your farm. The Go Farm Connect project is part of Renewing the Countryside and helps farmers. It's farmers helping farmers connect with government programs like the USDA, or we just did some deer fencing with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and Minnesota Department of Agriculture and all that. So, on these webinars, you are all muted to start. We are going to record this, and we have recorded all the other webinars we did in our series for your review later on. All of those can be found at gofarmconnect.org. As we go through, you may have a question that pops in your mind. Could you please pop that question in writing into the chat? And my colleague Laura is monitoring that. And we'll ask those questions at the end to the group so that we all can get enlightened on what we might come up with for that answer. So those are a few housekeeping items. Again, the Go Farm Connect project is a project of Renewing the Countryside, and it is farmers helping farmers get access to government programs such as USDA loans or NRCS programs, all of those good things. You can find it at gofarmconnect.org or scan that QR code and it'll bring you right to the website. You can find some of these lovely people to work with you and help you with a whole host of different farming activities. So today, our last session, we're going to be learning about value-based decision-making for risk management. So we discussed a whole lot of very logical, mathy, financial things throughout this whole series, a lot of left brain thinking. And so we want to bring it home and kind of conclude with the other half of our brain today, which is an equal player and perhaps maybe maybe more of a decision maker in our processes on the farm. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about those values that we have that help us make decisions on the farm. We've laid out a lot of math equations and ratios and all these things, spreadsheets and other tools like that to help you. And we're going to conclude now with some of those softer skills, some of those feelings that are also going to help in your farm management. So today we're going to be hearing from my friend and colleague Nick Olson from the Land Stewardship Project. He is also a farmer with Prairie Drifter Farms and a veteran farmer of a number of years. So he brings two hats, kind of a technical assistance provider type hat and a farmer hat, which is great. And so how the day is going to look or the hour is going to look is we're going to talk about what values are, how they're related to risk management. We'll hear a little bit about what Prairie Drifter Farm is all about, which is Nick's farm. And then Nick's going to talk to us a little bit about holistic management, which is a great another tool for really guiding with your values on your farm decisions. And then we'll start to discuss on how to integrate those values into your decision making in your farm. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So values, what are they? Why are they important to your business? Why are we talking about them instead of, some sexy spreadsheet? Well, that's because values are very, very important and they guide our decision makings, whether we identify them or not. So it's kind of like whether with those spreadsheets or ratios or whatnot, if you are, you can use them or not, right? But values, you're kind of utilizing them whether you know it or not. So it's good to develop what they are and share them with your team. So values are basically beliefs and standards or qualities that are important to you. They're not goals, and we'll talk a little bit about goals and how values impact goals. But they're kind of the preset to goals. And the values are really what affects our decision making, really at a fundamental level, both in the whole brain science and just in general. Um, so why is it pertaining to risk management, and why are we including this in our webinar series? Well, if you can identify the values that you hold dear and that are helping you guide these decisions, whether you know them or not, it's going to really help you communicate those decisions with your management team, but also maybe some external force like a banker or an insurance agent or a real estate agent or somebody like that who's going to help you on your farm journey. It can also help you find common ground with your management team. You know, if you have a spouse that you're farming with and you know why you're farming, and then they know, maybe you can find some common ground that can help you make those decisions together. And oftentimes, I hate to say this, but this is one of those really tough professions you're going to get into, and it will beat you down. Farming is hard. And so it will guide you through those tough times when you are beaten down by this career, which will inevitably happen. Sorry, folks. Um, but if you have those values identified, you really can let that be a guide during those tough times for those decisions that seem impossible at that time. And in all of your decision making, you know, from marketing to growing your crops, to keeping records, to your financial decision making, all of these things can be guided if you can identify those values, and that can really help make things a little quicker or a little bit more seamless. So, what are some examples of values? It can be things as simple as, well, I want to farm full time, or I've got a big debt load that I want to pay down, or I want to take pride in my products and really have the best quality to show for it, or it could be even more based on, I want to have time with my family. I want to work out of the home where I can be at home with family, or I want to work outside, or I want to be in the countryside or be in the hometown that I grew up in, or not be in the hometown I grew up in. Um, or, you know, it could be I just want to work with animals. I want to grow things out of the soil. I want to grow with plants. Um, or it could be, you know, as nuanced as I want to generate this much percent of my income from the farm. All of these are values that we have that really help guide where our decisions are going. So because they're so nebulous, it's sometimes helpful to kind of break the values down into four different sections. So you can have those personal values, and this is really going to be how you generate a lot of your own values, and those would need to be shared with your management team. But how do your own values impact your decision making? And then what are your economic values, and what is your team's economic values? Do you want to be debt free? Do you want to be ambitious and take out a lot of and grow that business really well? How important is being profitable to you, or is breaking even just fine? Or is offsetting your farm income okay? You know, all of those things are values that will guide your planning. And a lot of times, this is kind of maybe an underwritten one that we don't think about a whole lot, but environmental values. You know, if you were like me and you were pulling millions of weeds this year, you know, that really comes down to an environmental value. I am not willing to spray Roundup or any other commercial herbicide, and so here I am for hours and hours weeding. That is an environmental value that I have that has impacted how I've spent a good portion of my time this summer, as probably many of you have as well. And then your community values. Where do you want to be? What kind of community do you want to be in? Who are your friends? Who are your community members that you associate with? So these are nice, kind of handy ways to break it down, so it's not so overwhelming to just think about what your values are. So how can you use this with risk management? You can use this as an internal use, so in which I would definitely say do it first for yourself and then maybe do it for a lender or an insurance agent or something like that. But definitely talk to your management team, your spouse, your key employees, key partners, volunteers that help you on the farm. Make a list of those values that you all have. And it can be very informal. It can be written on the back of a napkin, or it can be put in, nice poetic prose. You can also
And
use this
then
for an external use too. So if you are writing a business plan, oftentimes there is a statement of values that some templates use. Um, as well as if you are, maybe presenting to staff that you have, like these are the values of working at my farm. That might be a nice place to include your values. So the main reason of why we want to know what our values are is so that we can share them with the management team, and then we can prioritize what values are really important to the business. My classic example is we're doing these worksheets that I'm going to show you here in a minute. And my partner Jay, it was like all of them were like beauty, aesthetics, making things look nice, all that sort of thing. Which I thought, that's a bunch of crap. We just want to, make money and be productive. And then, I really realized that actually I really kind of care about that. I hate, the big junk piles we have around our farm, and I'm always trying to get rid of them. And so we ended up realizing that really was a big priority for us. So we've done things like spent a good amount of money reciting our house in a very, flamboyant way that, normal people probably wouldn't be all that keen to do. But it's one of our goals, and I didn't really realize it was one that I had too. So that's why we want to do this. We want to prioritize those common goals, and that can really help us move forward when we get stuck. So one of my favorite resources to teach from is this Building a Sustainable Business. With the author, or one of the authors, is my friend DG Giacomo, who is brilliant. She's a research fellow at the University of Minnesota Extension. And she wrote this book. There are free to download worksheets that you can fill out online or print out and talk with your partner or your who's ever on your management team. The whole thing is downloadable and free, and it just got an update in 2024, so hot off the press. Go ahead and scan that QR code, and you can download this whole volume. It starts with values, and then it uses those values to set goals for your business. But the whole book is to design a business plan for your business, which I'll be teaching this winter in January in our Farm Business Basics class. So excellent resource. Everybody who's farming should at least have it on their shelf to reflect every once in a while. So here's some of the worksheets that you can do. It's filling out your personal values, your economic values, environmental and social. And then as you go through, it builds, you can see this is the very first worksheet in the whole book. And then it builds on prioritizing your goals, and then it moves into your business plan and goes all the way through from A to B. So that is a little bit about values and why they're important. We're going to shift over to Nick here, and he's going to talk a little bit about his farm and how values have impacted his decision making for his farming tenure, which he's still farming. So take it away, Nick.
You, Eric. Thanks to all the connectors on the call and to all of you for showing up over your lunch hour. It's a beautiful day here in central Minnesota, so I'm guessing it's pretty nice where most of you are. So thanks for taking the time to be with us. And Eric, thanks for reaching out about sharing a little bit of our story around values and how we have in the past and continue to kind of lean into our values when making decisions on our farm, both small, but also some of those bigger decisions that can be really hard to make. So I'm just going to do a little overview about our farm. It sounds like the questions can go in the chat if folks have them. I'm going to share a little additional framework similar to what Erik shared, and then just share some personal examples from our farm on how we've used values throughout the tenure of our farm. So again, my name is Nick Olson. My partner Joan and I run Prairie Drifter Farm. We are located in Litchfield, Minnesota, so that's about an hour and a half straight west of Minneapolis. Um, and we have been farming since 2006, so going on almost 20 years here. And we started Prairie Drifter Farm in 2010 on rented land. And then our first season on the farm that we reside on was in 2011. We are a diversified small scale vegetable operation. Um, we are raising certified organic vegetables for farm to school program. In our region, there are 3 schools that have gone together, which has been amazing. So Litchfield, Hutchinson, Dassel, Cokato. So we work with those school districts. We do a CSA, community supported agriculture, where we have share members come and pick vegetables up on a weekly basis. I'll talk a little bit more about how that has evolved based on our values. And then we also work with a local food co-op in Litchfield and one local restaurant, Jomas Hill, just outside of our town. We grow, like most small diversified vegetable farms, we grow too many vegetables. We grow many, many different varieties so that we constantly have different things available for our share members and our other accounts. And that's something that we continue to reflect on. A little less on the value side, but partially overlaps with values when we come to talking about time with family and together. So in addition to raising vegetables, we raise kids. So we've got 2 kiddos, a 9th grader, hard to believe, and a 6th grader. And I will say that like over time, not like we neglected our children early on, but I will say that over time, our values have led us to lean a little bit more into raising our children in the next few years than raising vegetables. And I'm going to talk about some of those shifts coming up. In the pictures on this slide, you'll see pigs. We used to raise pigs for halves and wholes for local folks. We no longer do that. Values-based decision, which I can talk about. We have a picture up on the top left of just people. People on our farm is really important. We look at our farm as a community farm and a community hub, and having people around is really important to us. Chickens. We've raised chickens for meat. We've raised chickens for eggs. We've raised chickens just for ourselves. And right now, I can happily say we have no chickens, and we have some friends nearby who have beautiful eggs for us to buy, which I'm happy to do. And then some solar panels, which I can talk about in a little bit. So Erik, you can hop to the next slide. Oh, this is kind of fun. My 9th grader's friend has a drone. And he lives like 2 miles away, but I guess these drones can fly kind of far. So last weekend, my son's friend texted my son this picture. He's like, "Hey, I flew over your farm with my drone today." So I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, "Oh, look, it's like a drone photo of our farm in real time." So that was taken last weekend. You can see we've got 3 hoop houses, a greenhouse, multiple fields in production, some in pasture, and then some infrastructure. So I just thought that was a really fun photo. So thanks to our neighbor kiddo for doing that. Remember back in the day, someone would show up in your driveway with a framed picture of your farm that they took from an airplane, and they would try to sell it to you for like $250. And now I just got a texted photo from a neighbor kid. So times are changing. All right, Erik, you can hop to the next slide. Awesome. So as Erik mentioned, not only do I co-run Prairie Drifter Farm with my partner Joan, I also work for the Land Stewardship Project, and I've worked with their beginning farmer training program for 18 years now. And in that program, we talk a lot about the stuff that Erik introduced about how setting the stage with your values is kind of a really, really critical way, I think, to ground yourself in farming and to ground yourself in making these big decisions. So it's been really interesting over the years, both on our farm and talking to other farmers. This idea of kind of basing your farm and your life in some core values has really, really, really helped a lot of our farmers make some really hard decisions. And the thing that I keep going back to when a farmer will share with me a decision that they made that might have been challenging or maybe wonderful is that when they feel like they are making these decisions, myself included, based on their core values, it feels good, right? So it might be a hard decision, but it feels really good because it feels like, wow, I'm actually making this decision based on a deeply held value that is still really important to me. So even though the decision is hard, I know that at the core of it, I'm leading with my values. I think oftentimes without that, what we do is we make knee-jerk decisions, and we're all guilty of this, right? It's just like, oh my gosh, I hate August, the bugs are awful, I'm quitting farming. I've seen people quit farming in the middle of August. Like, it's like, well, just stick it out, right? Or we're making this drastic change because I just can't do this anymore. And that might be the right decision, but if that decision can be made on some reflection around, hey, when we set out to farm and when we're under a lot less stress, these are the things that we hold really important. Are the things that are impacting this directly tied to those values? Are they impacting those values for positive or negative? And I think that that's really cool to be able to do that. So we use something called holistic management when we train beginning farmers, and my partner Joan and I went through a really lengthy process around holistic management. But essentially, it is a decision-making framework that leads with values. So these are just kind of the 7 steps of holistic management. But the one that I really wanted to like focus on, because I think it's what we're talking about today, and to me, I'll be honest, I think all 7 of these are great, but I go back to number 2 over and over and over again. When I talk to established farmers, we quickly go into conversations about number 2 way more than we do around using the right tools or managing the land. When I'm talking to my established farmer friends, we're constantly reflecting on like, why are we doing this? Is this still the right thing to be doing? How are we tweaking what we're doing so that it continues to stay in line with our values? So I just think this is a really, really important thing. And what I like about what it says on this slide under number 2 is it says, clarifying your vision, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, but define for you, like, what does it mean to thrive? What does it mean for you to thrive? What does it mean for the land around you to thrive? If you're raising livestock, what does that look like? I think about children. What does it look like for children to be thriving? And the one thing that I always reflect back on is like the way that I define thriving for myself, my children, the land around me isn't directly tied into how I'm farming or if I'm farming at all, right? So like in order for me to thrive, I don't have to have a 250 member CSA. Like that's not what I need to thrive. There are some elements of growing food for my community, doing it in an organic fashion so that I'm taking care of the environment, rotating crops so I'm building soil health, involving my children so they can understand what it's like to be on a farm. Like those are the values, right? But that wouldn't necessarily have to be done simply on a 250 member CSA, right? But oftentimes we get caught up in the way in which I'm farming, the way that I've set out to do this defines who I am and my farm. And I've been caught in that trap many, many times. But when I can step back and reflect a little bit on my values, I can kind of get to that core of like, well, here's actually what it means for me to be thriving. And some of those things I mentioned, right? Healthy kids, beautiful workplace, working with my community. All of those things are what make me thrive. So then I have to be a little bit more mindful of my decisions and say, okay, like, could I do that with a 300 member CSA if I expanded? Some years the answer is you bet. Like we can still match that. Other years it's like, could we do that with just a small garden plot and a couple of chickens in our backyard? Also, yes, right? So what it does is it allows me to know that farming is really important to me, but it's not what defines me. And it's not what defines whether or not I'm living out my true values. So I use that kind of as a guide. So Eric, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so I just talked about this just before, but in working through holistic management, and I think it's jargony, I'll just name that. But they have a lot of steps to do things, and I don't think necessarily the steps are the key to the success. But what I do think the key to the success is the process. So whether it's the resource that Erik shared, or you work in another way, the process of going through and looking at values and defining them is really at the core of this. So again, I love that there are tools out there are models out there to help us do that. But the most important thing for me and our farm, and that I articulate with beginning farmers, is like, just do it. If you found a better one online, do it. But what I don't want you to do is just poo-poo it and then move on and just head right into that business plan, right into that marketing plan. Because as Erik said, like, things are going to get rocky, things are going to get tough. And if you haven't grounded yourself in some of those values, that's where things start to fall apart. And they often don't fall apart overnight. They deteriorate over time, right? And that crumbling, crumbling, crumbling. And just like anything that deteriorates, at some point, there's usually a collapse, right? And it's usually not a big thing that makes that collapse. It's that one more flat tire on the tractor that just like was like deteriorating, and then it's that crumble. And that's when we sometimes really kind of go into these downward spirals. So again, having that values at that core allows me to know, like, oh, this eighth, what was it last year? I think we replaced 6 tires on vehicles and tractors. It was like, this 6th tire isn't what is going to break me or this farm. It's going to make me maybe reflect on what we're doing. But I know at the core, when I can go inside, cool down, have some cold water, like, there are some values that are still really important to me that I'm still living out. So anyway, within a holistic goal, they have 3 parts of your goals, and I'm just going to share ours because I think it's a good example of how we've kind of done this. But number 1 is these values, this quality of life, this thriving piece. And then number 2 is like, all right, so you've got these things that you say are important. How do you behave to actually live them out? Because here's the other hard part, right? Yes, I can say family is important to me, community is important to me. But if I haven't articulated what that looks like, 2 things happen. One is I trick myself that I'm doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, community, that guy came over the other day. We got it, check, right? Or, oh yeah, like peace and like, I don't know, tranquility is really important. It's like, oh yeah, remember I sat in my hammock 3 weeks ago? Like, you can trick yourself to like be like, oh, I'm actually living out my values. But without kind of naming what that looks like, it's harder to check yourself, right? And I think it is important to check ourselves because we are very guilty as farmers for kind of like explaining away why we do things, right? It's like, oh no, but like, I have to do it this way because it's so important. Or if I don't get this done tonight, then it's never going to get done. Or if I don't, run and irrigate, then all the crops are going to die. And sometimes this is true. That is the nature of farming. But other times we've tricked ourselves into placing the labor and the farm above some of those core values. So having these behaviors named out can help us kind of like do that check. Are we actually doing what we said? And then this idea of future vision, and that's just kind of this dream. Like, all of us are farming because we have this dream vision of something, right? We have a dream vision here. I have a dream vision of an amazing world for my children to live in. I have a dream vision for like having local foods be the dominant norm in my small rural community. I have a vision of like no more corn and soybeans in my neighborhood. I have a vision of restored prairie. I have a vision of like that badger who lives on my farm to like invite his friends over so that there's more badgers on my farm. Like, I have these visions of like how I want things to look, but I know that that's like an ongoing process that's beyond just me. But having that kind of like dreamed vision allows me to stay motivated and keep chugging toward that end goal and keep making that progress. Because another thing that can happen too is like we can get kind of like, oh, we got this. And then meanwhile, like I've got lax about my cover crops, or like I haven't updated any pollinator plants in the last 10 years because we did that, when we got started. Or so just like continuing to kind of push ourselves to be like, oh, but we said we wanted to keep moving this ball forward. How do we do that? Yeah, so next slide, Erik. Um, I know it's a compass, right? So I do really look at this like, this is our North Star. These values that we hold are our North Star. They're guiding us in the direction that we want to go. And I just tell everybody, like, this is kind of just life, but right, none of it's a straight path. So where we are at today in 2025 is not where we had planned to be when we got started in farming in 2010, right? In 2010, we were convinced that by year 5, which would have been 2015, that we would be farming full time, both of us, and generating all of our income from our farm. That was our goal. That was kind of like the farm goal, right? Um, we never made it there. And we got close. But then using our values, which I'm about to share, we decided to make some other decisions to help us get closer to our values. And what that meant is not scaling the farm up as far as we had originally thought so that I could keep working part-time with Land Stewardship Project so we could have health insurance, so we could have some paid vacation, so we could start saving for retirement, so we could put some money into our college kids, funds for college for our kiddos. And just based on kind of some of these values, I knew that like working off farm wasn't taking me away from my values. It might be taking me away from the farm sometimes, and it might seem distracting at times, but it was still chugging us toward those values that we had, that North Star. Again, windy path, but we were still making progress forward, and that was really important. Um, the next slide, this is just what Erik talked about, but like this is like, I think all of these things have happened to me on the farm. So these aren't pictures from my farm, but I mentioned tractor tires all the time. We had a giant storm. That's not our picture, but like a tree's gonna fall on one of your buildings. We definitely had fields that look like the dude in the yellow there. This year, actually, we had some of that this year and in years past. Definitely had my delivery truck break down in the middle of an intersection twice. So you get on the flatbed and it takes you on your deliveries for you, which is kind of fun. You got like a driver. Hoop houses collapsing under snow. We haven't had that. We've had the plastic blow off. And then the sick kiddo, right? Like that's one of the biggest things. It would be like whether it's ours or one of our employees, like surprise, sick kid. I can't do what I need to do today. All of those things happen. But again, those are frustrating. Those are inconveniences, but those aren't make or break. Those are things that if we have those values kind of lined up, it can keep us like, okay, deep breath, but we're going to keep moving forward. All right. So I'm just going to share what this looks like for us. So the way that we went about this and the way we do it with Farm Beginnings is we give folks a list of 100 values. There's plenty of these exercises online. And then you do this kind of funny thing where you have to pick your top 10, and then you got to narrow it down. You got to drop 5. And then, it gets really hard because it's like, oh, but these are all important. But it kind of winnows it down to like, hey, what are the most important values for you? So Erik, next slide. I'm just going to highlight, these aren't all of ours, but I'm just going to kind of highlight what that looks like for us. And I will say that we revisit these on an annual basis. So we usually do a November farm check-in. We do the obvious things of like checking on finances, checking on crops, markets, all of those things. How did the year go? What changes do we want to make to production, marketing, all of those things? We do that too, right? But we start that with, hey, let's revisit our values. Let's revisit our goals. Are we still in line with what we said? Are we still feeling like we're moving this forward? You know what hasn't changed? Our farm has changed a lot over the years. What hasn't changed is our values. They really haven't. Like they tweak a little bit, but for the most part, like the values that we hold now are the same values that we held 20 years ago when we started this farming journey. So that's pretty cool. They've grown, they've evolved a little bit, but like at the core things that are important to us 20 years ago are still the core things that are important to us right now. And the reason why that is important, again, is because I want to be flexible, I want to be nimble, and I want our farm to reflect that flexibility and nimbleness within leading a life based on values. So 3 core values that we hold. There's more, but these are like the top 3 that I pulled out for this. Our family and community, simplicity, and justice. So those are kind of the like core values, right? But like I said before, like you can easily trick yourself that like, oh yeah, I'm leading all these values without kind of articulating, well, what in the world does that even mean, right? So what we did is we wanted to sketch out a few things around what that looks like. So for example, I'll just read a couple of these if it's hard for you to see. So example, around like family and community. We want to encourage and practice kindness and compassion in our interactions with our family and our community. We want to cultivate and strengthen friendships within our community, and we want to invest our talents in our local and larger community. So like those are just some really like, right? None of that says 250 member CSA. None of that even says like organic farm. These are just like ways we want to live and interact. Under the simplicity one, that was a value that we hold. Live simply in a rural setting with a conscious effort to minimize our environmental impact. I really feel like the farm is kind of at the core of that, right? Like we are farming in the way that we do because we really want to do that for our community. We could do that without farming. I could do those things while living in town. So I just want to like make sure that like I understand that I can still do that, but we're really leaning into them here on this farm. And then I really like this one, connect with and have awe for the natural world. How many times are we out in the fields grinding, right? Muddy boots, crappy carrots, golf cart broke down, barrel washer's not working like it should be, and then like a flock of trumpeter swans flies by so low that you can hear their wings flapping, right? And it makes you pause and you're like, oh yeah, like this is part of why I do this, right? Like I get it. The carrots are bad, it's muddy, blah, blah, blah. But like I want to still be able, I don't want to be like, oh, dumb swans, like you're messing with, like you're making too much noise. I want to be like, pause and have that awe. Or right now, like the sumac, right? The sumac in the tree line is the most beautiful red right now. I want to, as I'm walking out to harvest beets in the morning, I want to take a look at that sumac and pause and be like, that's beautiful. I'm happy to be a part of this, right? So like really just naming that so that we don't get too caught up in what's around us in the micro, but also that kind of awe and wonder. And then around justice, be involved in social justice, and I'll kind of spell that out a little bit later. But like for us, that's really important. Social justice issues are important. Sometimes you feel really isolated on your farm, so encouraging us to think about ways that we can activate that, whether it's through a CSA newsletter, sharing about something that we learned, or whether that's in a conversation, or whether that's an active group within our community. That's very important to us as well. All right, Eric, next. All right. So within those, we also take it kind of to that like next level of what does this look like, right? So we had the values, we had like a statement under the values, but what does that look like? So for example, on the top one, cultivating and strengthening friendships within our community. Well, one of those commitments is like we invite people into our homes for meals, snacks, and games. And like we have to be intentional about that, right? Like the farm season just gets so overwhelming and it's just like I gotta go, I gotta grind, the kids gotta go to swimming, the kids got like, wait a minute, like what's the point? So intentionally inviting folks over for those things, whether it's a small gathering, a big gathering, is really important to us. Simplicity, this connection and awe I mentioned, just like pausing, but also just like playing outside. It's really easy to forget, like when you work outside all day, they're like, hey kids, we should go outside. So we played croquet 2 nights ago. Like that was really important. And then hiking, biking, canoeing, skiing, camping are all part of our regular routine. We didn't have that regular part in there before. And then we were tricking ourselves again and be like, oh yeah, remember we went canoeing in April. But here we're saying like, hey, this should be part of our regular routine. So really kind of holding ourselves to that. And then I mentioned before this one around justice. So like one way that we can commit to doing that in behavior is to take part in efforts, campaigns, and activities in our community that outreach and promote social justice. All right, Eric, nexto. So with that, Eric, should I pause for questions or should I just roll? What I'm trying to decide if am I gonna get too far and then people are gonna forget.
Let's do that. Let's take a pause and check in with our participants and see if we got any questions so far.
Let me go back to the previous slide because this is kind of like a shift slide. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone's got any questions or comments.
And I'm just scrolling through the chat here. I don't see anything yet.
I'm going to do the awkward 10-second pause, and then if we haven't heard any, we'll move on.
Yep.
I have a question, Nick. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk? You talked a little bit about that this isn't like an annual thing. Do you want to talk about kind of how you make time for this? Like what that and how much time kind of in this kind of goal setting, values setting process?
Yep. So thanks, Laura. So like I mentioned, we went through this process when we first got started farming. So it's been, I think I think the first time we did this was in 2009, was when we first sat down and kind of hashed this out. And that was a work in progress, right? So like 2009, and we like revisited it again in 2010, and just like over a few years, kind of just, and we hung it on the refrigerator. So it was like there, so we could scratch at it and kind of, so we just kind of had it as like this kind of working, living document. And I'll be honest, when we were first getting started farming, this is all we talked about. Like, you know, we just lived, breathed, ate small scale organic farming, to the point where it's probably like a little obsessive, but that's just like, we were so excited. We were so jazzed. We were in that phase. So like, this piece was just as much a part of that. Like, it's just as much as we were looking for land and looking to buy a tractor and trying to figure out, you know, what vegetables to grow. We were also just like really jiving with this process. So early on, we were spending a lot of time with this. I feel like by 2015, we had kind of come to a pretty solid foundation of like what this looked like for us. I was like, all right, we've been tweaking and playing with this for like 5, 6 years. It's really not changing much anymore. We're really kind of leaning into that. So from that point on, so for like the last 10 years, this is just part of our November annual check-in. So in November, we usually try to do a 2-day check-in. We try to spend half a day checking in on this piece, checking in on some of just like our family goals and things like that, relating back to this. And then the second part of the 2-day thing is usually a little more technical, you know, crops, markets, finances, all of those pieces. But we do spend a good like half day every November leaning into this, revisiting this. And like I said, it hasn't changed much in the last 10 years. One thing that we've done, but not well, that we'd really like to do. So our kids are 14 and 11. Now's the time to bring them into the fold, right? Like I would love it if the page that you're seeing on the screen right now included their input. You know, maybe we do that values thing all over again, but all four of us come up with our top values. And then we work together to say like, hey, what does it look like for us as a family on this farm to have those values? So we've talked about that for years. So maybe this is the kick in the pants to be like, all right, let's do that in November. Let's bring the kiddos in to this conversation because they're ready. We have these tables, we have these conversations around the dinner table all the time, but we haven't done an exercise with them. So I think that could be fun. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Laura. Any other questions, folks?
Okay, assuming you guys aren't in deep REM, we'll continue on to the next slide here.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So this is the slightly more abstract one, right? This is like, what does it look like in the future? And again, the reason why I think this is important is it's that vision, right? We are not little islands as these farms. It feels like it, but like we're part of something bigger, right? So like, how do we articulate that bigger vision? So for us, this was kind of like, this is our dream, like, right? This is kind of the holy grail. This is like what we're striving for. And the way that we broke it down is we kind of strived for like, what is our family strive? What's our family strive goal? And individuals. And that's in there. It's things like being good friends, being physically, mentally, and emotionally happy, interacting with our community members with kindness, like all of those things, which I feel like we're doing a pretty good job at. But again, I want to keep reminding myself, like, this is how I want to behave and interact. Our farm and land, right? Like, I think this is kind of that strive goal for the farm. So healthy and abundant water sources for irrigation and animals, healthy soil with rich biological diversity, perennial crops that add diversity and resilience, not only to the land, but also to our farm business. Diverse trees and shrubs. This one's been a little harder, but man, do I try. So I love northern Minnesota to like, it's my soulscape, as I've been told. So I've been trying to like drop these little niches onto our farm. Most of them die because they don't want to live here. My white pines that I planted, like 75 of them, I've got like 8 that are doing their thing. So like I'm happy about those white pines and watching those grow. Actually, one of them is like 20 feet tall now, so that's really cool. Tamaracks, they don't like it here. They're all dead. So those are a no-go. Jack in the pulpit, got a couple of those growing. So just these like little niches of things that like remind me of northern Minnesota. I planted probably 30 balsam firs, which are northern Minnesota evergreen, and they hate it here, but the deer hate them, so they're still alive. But these are like 15-year-old trees that are still like maybe hip high. I might have one that's shoulder high. They're just like, this is not their jam climate. But the deer do not eat them. So like they're not dead because nobody's eating them, but they're not doing what they want to do. But I keep trying. So anyway, that's just kind of a fun thing. And then within the community, I want our community to have opportunities for growth and inspiration within the arts, a local food co-op. I want to do my darndest to make sure that our local food co-op stays thriving and open. That's so important to us. A place where we have the ability to make deep friendships and do outdoor activities that we love very nearby. So that's kind of what we're striving for. Yeah. All right. So how does this play out, right? Because like I think sometimes this is all just kind of like good and hunky-dory to say this. But what I really wanted to share with the last minutes that I have here is like, how have we played this out on the farm? Because we have, right? So we've been farming, like I mentioned, since 2006, going on 20 years, which is hard to believe. And our farm has evolved and changed shape a lot. And the bulk of why and how it's changed have been rooted in our deep core values, which makes me really proud. It's like, I've been talking to a couple farmers who are no longer farming. And when they tell me the reasons why they are no longer farming, I'm proud of them too, because they're usually, not always, right? Sometimes there are circumstances that are out of folks' control, but like oftentimes, at least the farmers that have like gone through some of those values process, gone through some holistic decision making, when they are choosing to really make a major shift, like stop farming, which a lot of us near 50-year-olds are doing for many, many reasons. Like when folks are doing that with core values as the reason why, I'm like, good on you. Like you are making the right decision and you are in the driver's seat. And that's what I really want to impress upon people is I feel like when we can have our core values kind of set really strongly, we end up being able to drive more of the decision making. And that feels good, right? Like that feels like a win. That feels like a success versus when someone else or some other factor is driving those decisions for you. And I don't want to downplay the fact that like I was on a call with some folks from North Carolina earlier this spring. Hurricane Helene made some decisions for farmers that they had no control over, right? Like that is, and climate change is going to make those decisions happen here, fires, wildfires, massive droughts, like those things are going to happen. I also want to say like there are structural things that exist in farming right now that impact, especially communities of color, that take these decisions that we think we should be in the driver's seat away from certain people and certain groups of people. So as much as I want to say like values are it, like there are some external factors that sometimes we don't have control over. Obviously, we want to change those factors also, right? We want to mitigate climate change. We want to make sure that we have a just food and farming system. That being said, this values part still does hold very strongly. So, for example, I mentioned when we started farming, when we started Prairie Farm in 2010, by 2015, we were going to be farming full time. We were going to be making all this money and it was going to be awesome. And like, we got pretty close to what we were hoping. And then we realized a few things that I mentioned. One of the things we realized is like, when we were 30, with like a little baby, like the income that we thought we needed worked. As we got a little bit older and as our a second kid got added and we decided that retirement is something that we wanted to do. We decided like college might be a thing. The income goal that we had for our family went up, right? It was like, oh, we actually need to make a little bit more money. I want to drive a car that I know can reliably get my kids to town and back. I want to, be able to go on MEA vacation. If so, like there were certain things that when we first got started farming, it didn't matter. It's like, I just want, like, we're just going to grind. We're going to be on this farm all the time. It's going to be great. We only need this little bit of money and we'll be good. If that little bit of money never changed, we could have full-time farmed and made that, right? But like our needs were evolving, shifting, and therefore we had to reevaluate. Does it still make sense to push for that all income from the farm game when that income is going higher and higher? Because that means more production, that means more employees, that means more markets. And do we want to do that? Or do we want to be creative and say, hey, maybe we should mix that up with a little bit of off-farm income? So again, that's one thing that was influencing that. So more recently, I've got 3 examples here, and I kept those core values there. So we decided in 2023 that we wanted to scale back a little bit. And then the reasons for scaling back were many. It was seeming that the land needed a little bit of rest. It was seeming that employees were harder and harder to come by. It was seeming that the margins, our expenses were rising, but we were still, I talked to Laura about this the other day, we were still charging the same damn amount for kale that we were like eight years ago when we started, maybe like a quarter more a bunch. So it's like our costs were going up, but we weren't able to kind of like nail that with the price of our product. So we had all these decisions to face. In the meantime, over 13 years, we had built this amazing CSA base. We had 220 families. We loved them. Like, we changed our delivery model during COVID. So it was like hand delivering, not to people's houses, but like hand delivering a box to a physical person every week. How's your kids? How's your mom? Oh, yeah, I saw you broke your arm in pickleball. How we do it? Like those relationships became really, really strong. And then we were recognizing like we needed a shift. The farm needed a shift. But like, what were we going to do with all of our like wonderful folks? So like when we scaled back, instead of just being like, here's our new scale back, our scale back was very intended to keep as many share members receiving vegetables from our farm. What it meant is they were getting them less often and in smaller quantities. But what we wanted to do is we want to make sure we could maintain those relationships. So we more or less kept almost all of our families, not quite, we didn't have room for all of them, but they were getting vegetables every other week instead of every week, and the quantities were smaller. But that was a way that we really kind of based that decision on this value of community. That was really important to us. So we wanted to figure out how we could do that. That being said, we had to like reevaluate again this season, 2025, so this current season. I mentioned we have 2 kids. They are much more active in school things. Our son joined the marching band. Marching band is 1 month. It is June. All their parades are in June. All their events are in June. And we wanted to see that. We wanted to be a part of that. Well, those of you that have a vegetable farm, you know that June is not a great time to be running around central Minnesota to go to parades twice a week. So we had to think about what our farm looked like and how it was operating and make a decision. We also have aging parents, right? A lot of us at this age are in this scenario where our parents are aging. We want to spend more time with them. They actually need a little bit more of our time and help. I'm an only child of a single mom who lives not far by. Like, I want to be able to not be like, oh, sorry, mom, it's a harvest day today. I can't do, if my mom needs a ride or if she needs help pulling acorns off of her roof, which you don't do in the country, but I guess you do it in town, right? So like you help out where need be. So like we wanted to be available for this because family was one of those core values. So we opted to scale the farm back again, move me into a full-time year-round position at Land Stewardship Project. I'm still helping out on the farm quite often, but not at that degree, because what that did for us is it allowed more flexibility for us to spend time with our family, our kiddos, and our aging parents. That was really important. Hard decision. I'm still kind of like in a little bit of this loss of like, I harvested carrots this morning and then I'm back inside on, but again, my identity has to be more than just the farm. My identity has to be based on those core values that I hold so that I can be like, even though I'm on a Zoom call, like it's building this community that I want. I want robust small farms all over our region, right? So like being part of that is still important. Simplicity, I added one here. One of our goals, remember I talked about was just like having a minimal impact, being environmentally responsible. We'd been trying for many years to do solar on our farm, but it's cost prohibitive for most of us. But in 2023, the grant dollars kind of fell into place. But like we chose to take out a loan, even though I didn't talk about this, like we are debt adverse, period. We hate debt. Like most of our extra money is going to like pay down debt on the farm. And we really don't hold any other debt, right? We're lucky that way. But we've also been very intentional about like not taking out debt. If we can't afford it, we don't buy it. But we made this decision to take out a loan to put solar in because where we live, our electric co-op was offering us zero opportunities to plug into renewable energy. And we were like, hey, if you're not, I would have been very happy doing a buy-in program from them, but like they weren't offering that. So if they weren't going to offer that, I was really adamant, like, hey, how do we reduce our footprint? We have a farm, we have the space, we use a lot of electricity during the summer with walk-in coolers and pumps and all of these things. So we put that solar in, and that's been a really good way for us. It's also been a way, an educational piece, because now when our share members come, they ask us questions, right? Because there's solar panels when you roll in. What does that look like? Why are you doing that? Does it work? And we can kind of like articulate some of those values around that as well by reducing that. Yeah, so I think that was a lot. But questions. Yes, it looks like maybe there was a question in the chat. I didn't see it though, Eric. Is there a question or a comment?
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Oh yeah, you go ahead. You're right on it.
Oh, okay. Katie also shared about marching band, Nick. So similar that it's the most exhausting extracurricular that they've ever encountered, and the guilt of not being able to be more involved is high. So just, yeah, acknowledging that balance, like the struggle is very real there.
I also appreciate that, Katie, because there's also this like, yeah, I can just show up. I can be that guy that like runs in last minute, watches the kids march by, and then hops in the car and goes back to the farm and keeps working. But like my son explicitly asked me, he's like, can you volunteer at one of the parades, right? Like, can you not only just show up, but like, can you help? So like, and that's part about being a part of a community, right? I don't want to just be seen as like, oh yeah, we saw your dad for like 5 minutes and then he's gone. Like I want to be a part of that. That's a value that I hold. And I also like want to show up. So again, adjusting in these spaces. One thing that Joan and I talk about, and we kind of joke about this a little bit, but it's like, hard to believe that our kids are the age that they are, but like there's a window in which there's a good chance they will move on to something different in a couple years, right? Whether that's college or a gap year. My son Abe wants to just drive around in a van and play the drums, so like more power to him. But like whatever that is, like we could go back to a 220. I would look different, but like we could go back to a different farming model if we so chose. Like, because again, we're still kind of leading with values. And if that seems like the right angle at that time, that's still an option. So I do like that flexibility to be able to think about like, all right, how does this current pivot look 5 years from now, 6 years from now? And I probably don't have the answers because I don't know what I'm going to look like 6 years from now or what the world's going to look like or, all of those things. But again, most likely, unless there's some really dramatic change, our values will still be the same 5 years from now. So we'll be able to base some of those decisions on that.
Right. Any other questions out there? You guys feel free to come off mute now and just go ahead and ask a question if you got something on your mind. With that, we talked a lot about some of the struggles that happen with farming, and know that you're not alone in those, and there are some professionals that can help you talk through some of those difficult times. Your values are going to help, but sometimes you might need a professional, and these three folks can help you with any sort of mental health issue you are having, or maybe a family member is having. And it is free and confidential from three different professionals. There's a number there you can call, or you can call these individuals. But did I mention this is free? No insurance, no going to the hospital. Give them a call. They'll give you a call back. It's a pretty good deal. I see Willa Lynn has her hand up. Hi, Willa Lynn.
Hi, I was just wondering about the solar. Could you send more information about that? Because I'm very interested in installing solar at our farm. If we could get some resources.
You located in Minnesota? Or what state?
Minnesota. Yep.
Minnesota. Um, the two resources that I would share would be Sun Solar United Neighbors. They have like direct folks that can help. Um, and then we did work with USDA on the REAP grant, um, which there are a lot of resources out, but Sun also helps folks with these REAP grants. So those are the two resources. I don't know if you want to pop them in the chat. But the USDA REAP grant for farms and then Solar United Neighbors are the two biggest resources that come to mind for me.
Very cool.
Thank you. And this is so I can always look back.
Yes, this is recorded, so anyone can go back and look. Again, a few more resources. Go Farm Connect. Find yourself a connector that can help you navigate some of these difficult struggles with farming and get you access to government programs like USDA, NRCS, and FSA programs that can help you with a whole host of things on your farm. It looks like Nick just dropped the two links there in the chat. And then, we talked about so many of those things that are very tangible, very math heavy, very ratio, very spreadsheet like. And now we are kind of summing up the webinars with some of these more softer skills, these values, these emotional things that really drive our core. And if you want help with any of these things, know that you are providing the values and the core feelings. And if you want help with some of the mathy, spreadsheety stuff, Laura and I and Nura are very eager to help you. We are going to be starting a new farm business management for local food farmers program at Renewing the Countryside. Scan the QR code to visit the website. And this is where we will work just like the connectors with you guys one-on-one to help you with your farm financial goals. So you're going to need to investigate those values and let them lead into your goals. But then once you have those, we can come help you with some of the heavy lifting on the financial side. So you can check out a little bit more of what we do and who we work with on the website. But basically, anything sort of in the financial realm, if you're looking to get a loan or a grant or somebody's asking you for this thing called a balance sheet that you're not really familiar with, that is something that we would be happy to help you with. Here's my contact information here. I've helped a number of people buy tractors, buy land, buy neighboring land that they want to expand their operation onto. Many of my folks have gotten grants that we've worked on together. So it's just a really kind of an enjoyment for me to be able to see farmers kind of grow in the program. I was talking to a gal right before this who's, on her third year of record keeping, and we're really dialing in some of the stuff she's growing. It's been a lot of fun. Here's Laura, who is on the chat or on the call today. And she is also a produce farmer and has been for, I think, the last 20 years as well. And then we have Nura Abed, who is in the Twin Cities area, St. Paul, and is also on our farm business management team. So with that, feel free to reach out for help. And I wish you the best of luck as this season draws to a close. Remember, think about those values. Remember, you're not alone. There's plenty of people to reach out to, plenty of resources, and have a great rest of your season. And thanks for joining us on this webinar series.